College football season already underway. The Seminoles lost last weekend. Canes and Gators face off on Saturday in their opener against each other. NFL season 8 days away, and this will be the first season Florida gamblers will be able to legally bet on games without even leaving their couch, really. What does it mean? Probably financial problems or worse for thousands of Floridians. Let's talk about it. So we bring in Jennifer Kruse, Executive Director of the Florida Council on Compulsive Gambling. You could follow the group on X at FL Council. Jennifer, good to talk to you. I appreciate the time.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
All right, there's all sorts of gambling, right? You could go to the casino, play blackjack or slots or whatever. You could bet on the horses or jai-alai. Of course, the lottery. But if I had to bet, pun totally intended, I would guess that football is the king when it comes to just the pure numbers of money that people are betting. Is that fair?
So, yeah, it's definitely increasing in popularity. That's fair. I will tell you that this past year, which, our fiscal closes out June 30th, we saw online gambling surpass all other types of gambling as the primary gambling activity of the gambler. And that's from, callers to our 888-ADMIT-IT problem gambling helpline. That's the first time ever that slot machines hasn't been the primary problem.
That's fascinating. And so is that the biggest, you've always been able to gamble here on sports, right? Illegally with a bookie or through those offshore betting sites. But now that it is legal in Florida, is that the biggest trend you see? Are people just turning to it because they feel more comfortable?
So I think, when you have legal operators, people who, traditionally may not, want to break the law or gamble illegally, they'll be more inclined to say, okay, well, now this is something that's acceptable, and definitely be more inclined to place a bet. We've really seen an uptick in online gambling pretty much since COVID times. That's when, a lot of people switched forms of gambling from your traditional brick and mortar establishments to more accessible forms of gambling. So certainly with the illegal operators, that was an increasing trend that we saw up until the legalization this past year.
I always found it fascinating that some of our, especially conservative leaders in the state, were always hesitant to expand gambling in terms of casinos or sports betting, things like that. But they were always happy to expand the lottery. In terms of addiction, is sports betting a bigger addiction than playing the lottery, for example?
So can't comment on that in terms of the addiction, right? Like that's a diagnosable, treatable illness that, a mental health clinician would have to define somebody as being a gambling addict. In terms of the popularity and the callers that we see on the helpline, lottery is always the top secondary problem. And that's been the trend for decades. I think with lottery, a lot of times people don't even see that as gambling.
Yeah.
They won't even tell us. They won't disclaim, oh, I'm gambling on the lottery until we ask them. So, and then when we ask them, it's, oh, well, yeah, I play the lottery, but, that's not gambling.
Yeah.
It's the perception that, but it is. And definitely that's the number one secondary problem year after year.
If you or somebody you know, by the way, thinks you have a gambling problem, the number to call is 888-ADMIT-IT, 888-ADMIT-IT. We're speaking with Jennifer Kruse, Executive Director of the Florida Council on Compulsive Gambling. Let me ask you what might be a dumb question, but I'm used to it, the people that know me, so I'm going to ask anyway. What constitutes a problem gambler or problem gambling?
So there are warning signs that, loved ones and others can look out for. The thing with gambling, unlike substance abuse, is it's a hidden addiction. There are no outward physical signs like you would typically see with somebody that's struggling with drugs or alcohol. And that's also true with online gambling. There's even less signs because somebody doesn't have to get up and leave their couch to go to a casino or to a store to buy a lottery ticket. They could be sitting right next to you on their phones placing bets and you have no idea. But in terms of the criteria, it's tolerance to gambling. They need to bet more and more money or gamble more frequently to achieve that same high.
Right.
Withdrawal. There's actual withdrawal signs. Like if somebody tries to stop gambling and they have a gambling problem, they actually experience physical withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
Preoccupation, all this, similar symptoms to drugs and alcohol, but different.
Yeah, and all the research shows that when somebody is addicted to gambling and they place a bet, the same stimulation centers in the brain are lit up as when they might when a coke addict might take a couple lines.
Yep. Yep. Those dopamines are the same, and it activates the same reward center in the brain. And that's why we see a lot of times, people who have struggled in the past with drugs or alcohol switch the addiction to gambling, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Very, very, very similar.
A couple final questions for you. Looking at your website, I think especially right now, very important for parents to be aware of, because more than half of the people who become problem gamblers, according to your website, started gambling before the age of 25, and then the average gambling debt is more than 25 grand. Both of those are significant.
Definitely. And what I'll tell you amongst online gamblers is we are seeing a much younger demographic. So again, looking at last year's helpline data, when looking at all gambling types, 30% of the population were under the age of 30. With online gambling in particular, more than half, 54%, were under the age of 30.
Are there stats on whether those that become problem gamblers are the same people that could least afford to spend money on doing it than they're doing it on playing the lottery or sports nonetheless?
So, I would say to you that it just depends. Anybody can become addicted. You don't know until, you start playing. There are genetic factors that make some people more predisposed than others. What we see with the online gamblers actually is the opposite. The online gamblers have higher incomes.
Right.
They have higher incomes. They have less losses, less debts. I think a lot of that also, too, is because of the age range. When you're looking at that 18 to 25 demographic, which is a big chunk of it, that's, I think, 38% of them were 18 to 25 this past year. Those are your college students. So what they're doing is they're moving back home with their parents, and they're resorting to all kinds of things. I mean, we've seen people who are, going to sperm banks, selling blood plasma to get extra money to gamble. I mean, you laugh, but it's sad and it's true.
It is.
And, they'll resort to whatever, to keep money. Money is the drug that fuels the addiction.
Yeah. Well, if that's you or somebody you know or somebody you're concerned about, the phone number to call is 888-ADMITTED, 888-ADMITTED, or you can follow the group on X at FL Council. Jennifer Kruse, Executive Director of the Florida Council on Compulsive Gambling. Thanks for the time. I appreciate the info as well. Best of luck.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Yeah, going back, back in the 90s, I did a lot of sports gambling, and it was illegal back then. A lot. Played a lot of online poker that I shouldn't have. And these days, I place really 2 bets a year for my fantasy football team, which I'm about to do this weekend. More than 30 years been doing that. And for a pick'em league that I play. That's about it. Maybe a bet on the Super Bowl, but yeah, it's a problem for an increasing number of people, especially now that it's legal in our state. So I wanted to bring that to you.